Greetings and welcome to another Educator Innovator Hangout on Air. It's Thursday, August 7th, and today we'll be talking about Mars Generation 1 Argubot Academy, a tablet app developed by GlassLab Games in conjunction with NASA and the National Writing Project that teaches argumentation through fun gameplay. I'm your host, Paul O., and I'm joining the webinar from the National Writing Project offices in Berkeley, California. Today our guests are Seth Corrigan of GlassLab Games, Jason Sellers of the Bay Area Writing Project, and Rachel Sanders of the Upstate Writing Project. Let's let our guests introduce themselves, starting on screen left. Jason?
Sure, thanks, Paul. Jason Sellers. I'm a technology liaison with the Bay Area Writing Project. I've been involved in National Writing Project for the past 5 years. I've been a teacher for about 5 years. Yeah, so I had an opportunity to test out Argubot Academy with a group of students this summer.
Cool, wonderful. Rachel?
My name is Rachel Sanders. I'm from the Upstate Writing Project in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm a 7th grade teacher, and I've done a gaming camp with the Upstate Writing Project each summer. And this year we were able to play test the Argubot software with our campers. And I look forward to trying it out in my classroom this year.
Fantastic. And Seth?
Hi, I'm Seth Corrigan. I'm with GlassLab Games. I'm a researcher here. I focus on assessment design as well as learning analytics. Over the last 5 years or so, I've been focused on creating simulation-based and game-based assessments for students that also support learning.
Wonderful. Yeah, we feel very fortunate to have you, Seth, here on the program, and as well Jason and Rachel. So let's jump right in. Seth, you seem like the perfect person to ask, what exactly is Argubot Academy, Mars Generation 1 Argubot Academy?
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about the game. So let me switch over to screen share, Paul, and I can switch right into the deck that I've prepared.
Fantastic.
There are just a few slides. Here we go. And I also want to show some examples from the game itself to give folks an idea of what's really happening there. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me just go into full mode. So, sorry guys, let me get this here. Okay. So Mars Generation is a text-based game focused on argumentation, and the setting is Mars settlement in the future. But the settlement's a little bit different because this community settles its differences through arguments, but they don't, or debates, I guess we should say. But they don't have the debates themselves. They actually build what we call Argubots to have those debates for them. And so as a player, you're dropped into that city or that settlement, and one of your first tasks is to learn how to build these Argubots and then carry them into what we call argument duels to help settle different debates going on in the community. And there are two really important moments, or really three. I'll talk about all three, but two of the most important ones for argumentation itself are focused on what we call the claim core, and that's this here. And then also the duel mode, the sort of Argubot battle mode. And in the claim core, players are tasked with building the power system for their robots. And to do that, they've got to bring in a claim and support it with evidence. And that's what actually powers these Argubots in the course of the game. And once they've built it...
Sorry to interrupt. I believe if you are in presentation mode,
yeah.
There we go. Oh, I think the slides were not advancing. I didn't see an advancing of the slides.
Oh, that's interesting. So I was advancing. Let me try.
There we go. Yeah.
So is it taking up the full screen? Can you guys see the images clearly?
We're not seeing presentation mode, but we are seeing the image clearly. So I think that would be. I think this is fine.
This is fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm just pointing out these two important moments or mechanics in the game. One is this idea of building an argument and powering your bot up, and you do that as a player by bringing in evidence in support of a claim in this claim core builder. And I'll show more about this in a moment, but I just want to give you an overview of these important points in the game. And the second are these argument duels themselves. In these cases, the player faces off against the AI or the game system in a series of arguments, all of which are designed to help the community figure out how it should proceed, different policies it should have, those sorts of things. So that's the basics of the game, and some of the motivations that got us focused on argumentation in particular was this new emphasis on argumentation and the standards, the Common Core standards. And there, they talk about two different shifts. One is toward informational text, and the second is towards argumentation. And what we thought was that it may be helpful for teachers to have a game like this one to help build not only the students' understanding of argumentation, but their own possibly. And so what we did was we started looking at existing frameworks. And Paul, how is this showing up? This has animations built into it, but is the whole slide showing up for you guys at once?
Yeah, I believe we're seeing the excuse me. I believe we're seeing the entire slide at once.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So there are two different frameworks that we decided to lean on for the way we treat argumentation. And the first one is this, what we call the Toulmin Framework. It's coming from Tollman. And he associated arguments with 4 different parts or components. First, there's the claim that the speaker is making, and she tends to support that with facts or data, what we might call evidence. But there's also this piece of reasoning, and that explains the connection between the evidence you're bringing to bear and your claim. And I'll say more about that in a moment. I think it becomes clear when we talk about the next framework we lean on too. And then there's an additional piece called backing, and that's additional evidence to support your reasoning and the connection between your evidence and your claim. The next framework that we lean on is called the Walton Framework. And in that case, the emphasis is on schemes, this idea of argumentation schemes. So as an example, somebody can argue by authority, by referring to an expert, what they said or what they did as part of their data or evidence for why we should do something, for example. So thinking about one will help you reach conclusions about the other. And in that framework, this notion of critical questions is very important. So you can think to yourself, well, if someone's mentioning an authority for a reason I should believe or do something, then one of the first things you might want to ask is, well, first of all, is that person really an authority? What evidence do we have? And the second might be something like, well, okay, maybe this is an authority, but do other experts agree with your opinion? And the big idea here is to begin treating arguments something more like text structures. So we have a pretty good idea from the research over the last, 15, 20 years now, that as students get a good sense for text structures, so for example, cause and effect, problem solution, process, as they get to the point where they can identify the type of text that they're reading, that actually helps out with comprehension quite a bit. So we're hoping that the same thing works here in argumentation, and we expect that it does, and the evidence we have so far suggests it is working. That once students can begin understanding or associating a given argument with the type of scheme that's being used, or the set of schemes being used, that they've got a better shot at comprehending the argument, and then also they've got a better chance at being critical of it, and evaluating it, critiquing it in the way that you'd expect a mature reader to do. So that's part of the motivation here in bringing in these two frameworks. The Toulmin Framework is really emphasized in the game to give kids a good sense of the components of the argument. The arguments are made up of facts, data, and claims, or claims and evidence, that you can expect some kind of reasoning in them, and that they might involve some kind of backing. In other words, if someone asks me a critical question, I should have some additional evidence to offer. And then the second part here, we're also emphasizing this idea of schemes, argumentation schemes and critical questions. So that leads to this sort of integrated view that we've built the game around. And as I said in the beginning, the heart of the first mechanic is this idea of building arguments by bringing evidence into support for a claim. As students advance in the game, they start gaining more equipment for their Argubots. So all Argubots have a claim and evidence pair to them. But as you get more sophisticated and you move on to what we call an Evo 2 bot or an Evo 3 bot, you get access to something called critical questions or CQ attacks. And at the same time, you start learning how these backing or these CQ shields work. So if someone asks me, well, how do I know that your expert is really an expert? I should have some backing attached to my Argubot that proves that this person really is an expert and knows what she's doing. So if that sets out sort of the general idea, what I'd like to do is just give you a quick view of what the game itself is like. And I've put together a video to do that. This first part of the video is going to bring you through something that we call claim core training. So as a player, you've just landed on the Mars Academy, or on Mars, and have traveled to the Mars Academy. And now you've got some mentors in the game helping to show you how to use your Argubot. And the first step is how to build these cores that we've been talking about. There's some music that goes along with the game, but I'm going to go ahead and shut it off now. So this is Lucas. This is one of our first mentors in the game. And he's showing us how to use this core builder here. Down to the bottom, you see the evidence frame or toolbox. That's evidence that I've collected in the environment. And off to the left-hand side are the claims that I have to choose from. So, oops, sorry guys. I just hit the wrong button there. Let's hit 260.
And Seth, I just want to say that I think when you're in presentation mode, I think we're not seeing the video, unfortunately.
Okay. So then let me switch out of presentation mode.
And then I'm not sure if in non-presentation mode whether you'll be able to show the video or not.
Okay, let's try.
Okay.
But Paul, if it's just screen share, it should work, shouldn't it?
I think, yeah, I think if it's, I've not tried to show a video embedded in a slide deck before, but I think if it's just the video itself, then it should work via screen share.
Okay, let's try this. Is
there
that better?
Yeah, that's better. That works.
Okay, great. Let me move this out of the way. Okay. So that was Lucas. He's going to come back in. And as I was saying before, he's going to help us understand how to use this Argubot equip, or this claim core equip here. Off to the left side are the claims. Down below is the evidence tray. That's where I'll get my evidence. And we'll say a little bit more about these test strips over here on the side. So you can see it's all text-based. The exchange is taking place through this text. And as a player, I'm tapping on the screen to advance the text. So here, when I was preparing for this, I looked at the claim, and I start looking through my evidence down in my tray, trying to find a piece of evidence that really supports that claim. And eventually what I'll do is I'll grab that piece of evidence and bring it up into the core there, as well as the claim. And I want to fuse those two things together and make that link between the claim and the evidence. And now I can reach over and grab these test strips and check and make sure that that evidence is relevant and that it's supporting for the claim. It looks like it is, and so I test the power level of my bot, and it's 100% because that's a good core. And here's one more. So we have a new claim now. Bring that over in. Teens should stay at the Academy as long as it takes to master Argubot engineering. That's the claim I need to support. And now I'm going to look through my evidence tray to find evidence that supports it. As you can see, there's a mixture of evidence. Some of it's related, some of it's contradictory. But hopefully I brought up a supporting piece. It looks like I did. I can test it again if I want to. Oh, now look, this is actually contradictory, right? Our learning specialist is saying that students should finish as quickly as they can. So when I bring that support strip up, it says not supporting. That's an indication I've got a bad core and I need to change it. So as a player, I might test the level anyway. It doesn't have a good amount of power. Lucas is going to give me some feedback and give me another chance. So here's a new claim. Students should be able to study what they want to at Bracket City. Look through evidence to find something that supports that claim. And now I'm all out of test strips, and so I'm on my own. I close the core and check the power level. And that should be a good core. Yeah, and it is. Good. So that's just a quick example of some of the gameplay that would help students better understand the components of an argument, that they're made up of claims and evidence, and also begin building an awareness among the students that they're checking for, evaluating these claim-evidence pairs for the relevance of the evidence as well as the support status of the evidence. That's two ways you can evaluate an argument very quickly. They're simple things to do, but we're hoping that that's helpful to students, and we also think that it's been helpful for students to get a better sense for the components in an argument. Now that takes care of the Toulmin part of the framework, if you remember that. We're really just focusing on helping students understand what kinds of things make up arguments, what are the relationships between claims and evidence, and how can we evaluate that relationship between the claim and the evidence. We okay so far, Paul?
Yes, great.
Okay, great. So if I can just show one more clip here, and it'll take me a second to get to the right spot. But now this clip emphasizes what I was calling the Walton portion of the framework. And remember, that part of the framework is focused on helping students understand that there are different schemes, there are different ways to argue, and help them to identify schemes in an argument. And that's a building block, we think, towards getting to a spot as a student where you can pose these critical questions. And if you remember what I said about this idea of text structures, the hope is, or the aim is, to get students to the point where they can read an argument, identify the scheme, or schemes, plural, that they're using, and then right away have a set of critical questions that they can use to be more critical of what the person is saying. All right. So this looks like it's about the right spot, and we'll start this playthrough here. So I think this particular argument is just a silly one to get kids started on this idea of schemes, but it's about what's the best classic video game. Remember, we're set in the future here. My position is that Simcity Edu is the best classic video game of all time, but Lucas, my mentor, says Minecraft is. And so take a look. Here, I'll pause it here for a moment because I want to explain something here. The heart of the game is really setting up these analogs between an argument and these Argubots. So each Argubot represents a different scheme, argumentation scheme. In my corner here is what we call an authoritron. This is this guy with the big loudspeaker on his head. Now authoritrons can only use evidence from experts or authorities. That's their scheme, and that's what they can do. Lucas, on the other hand, he's got in the back, in the far back there, something we call a consabot. That Argubot argues by consequence. And so the kind of evidence you need to power it up are consequences of the claim that you're arguing for or against. And then the one in the foreground there, the Argubot in the foreground, is the observatron. And that observatron, as the name suggests, it uses observations as its evidence. That's the kind of evidence it can accept. So just that. Now, in this next part of the play, I'll tap on each of those Argubots to be able to see their claims and the evidence they're bringing to bear for it. Minecraft is the best. Oh, but look, he's got an observation that suggests that Temple Run is the best. So that evidence is not good. It seems relevant to the argument we're having, but it doesn't support its claim. In the back there, Minecraft is the best, but it looks like there's a really good consequence from playing Simcity Edu, which is understanding better how cities work. And so again, that evidence doesn't support the claim. So in the upper left-hand corner here, I've got two choices for attacks: doesn't support and not relevant. I chose doesn't support. Let's see how that goes for us. Yeah, looks like it was successful. So that shut that argument down. And now it'll be Lucas's turn. We should have a pretty good core, right? Let's see. Simcity Edu is the best classic video game. And Lucas is saying the evidence is not related to our claim. But I worked pretty hard, and I know that it is. So that attack actually backfires on Lucas. And now it's my turn again. And there's that same evidence claim pair that's not supporting. So that should be my choice, and it is. Good. And it looks like that was successful too. So that just gives you a sense of how we're bringing those two frameworks for argumentation into play in the game to build up an understanding of arguments as text structures for kids. Give them a chance at identifying the schemes that are being used within arguments, and then building up a set of, or a stock of, critical questions they can pose once they've identified the scheme. That's one piece, and that's the Walton piece. And then the second component is helping students to understand what are the elements of an argument. What are the core elements you've really got to be aware of? And what are the ways those elements need to relate to each other? How does a claim and a piece of evidence need to relate to one another in order to have a strong argument? That's the focus. Okay?
That was that was a fantastic demonstration, Seth.
Great.
And I'm curious, as you've been testing this game out, and we'll hear more from Jason and Rachel in a moment, but what are you finding in terms of the ways in which young people are responding to this way of thinking about argumentation?
Yeah, so we have, gosh, we've got over 200 play tests at this point, and you know I should have surfaced earlier on that we're still very early in this process of developing the game. We've gone for what we call an alpha release in late May. We're going to have a beta release in the fall. The game has only been under development for the last 7 months or so. So that's one piece. But in the course of that time, we've had over 200 play tests, many of them one-on-one with our staff here. The majority, of course, in classrooms. We want to see how the game is working in classrooms. I can tell you from the interviews that I've done and the playthroughs that I've had, things seem to be working as expected, in the sense that when kids come to us, they typically do not identify components of an argument. They tend to think of an argument as one component or one thing, not as being made up of different parts. They don't identify those parts as claim and evidence, obviously. They're also not aware of schemes. They don't seem to be aware of different strategies for arguing. I've had one student out of, I think, 15 or 16 interviews now that had this idea of the bandwagon scheme or the bandwagon approach. The more people you can bring on board, the more likely you are to be right for your claim. But other than that, none of the students have talked about schemes. And these have all been middle schoolers. The game is focused for middle school in particular. So that's one piece. When they finish playing the game, and that's after 40 minutes of gameplay or so, they're typically able to identify 2 different schemes, usually the Observatron and the Consabot. Those are the popular ones. They're also able to describe what's special about those schemes. Some kids do it by describing the kinds of evidence that they use, and other kids do it by using something we call rhetorical markers. So in the case of the Observatron, we've crafted that evidence so the rhetorical markers are consistent. You always see cases of mentions of observations or mention of having seen or heard something, things like that. Likewise, the Consabot has a set of rhetorical markers to go with it, and so on. So they tend to understand or identify the schemes with those rhetorical markers as a different strategy for identifying the schemes. So that is tremendous progress right there. That's suggesting to us that they really are picking up these arguments as text structures. And then a third piece is that students, when they first, in the pre-interview, before playing the game, they don't tend to go straight to evaluating the evidence support and relevance, its support status and relevance for the claim. But afterward they do. They tend to do that. So those are big wins for us. It's still early on, and we'll keep building evidence, but those are some indications that things are working.
Great. And I just wanted to ask a couple of additional questions before we move on to Jason and Rachel. One is, so my understanding is that that NASA and the National Writing Project were involved in the development of this game. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you. I should have mentioned that in the beginning.
Sure.
So NASA has been a wonderful partner for us. They've helped a great deal with the content. If you think about all the text that sits behind this game, so right now the game is designed to be about a 90-minute, 2-hour to 2-hour experience, and there's a lot of text and a lot of content that goes into it. And so they've been key advisors to us in building up that text to make sure it was factually accurate, and that some of the arguments that the game involves are actually things they're having to deal with now as they think more clearly about actually getting a group to Mars. So that's one group that's been very helpful, and then of course National Writing Project has been wonderful all along the way. We've come to you guys, I think, half a dozen times now for advice on the game, how to best structure argumentation and instruction of argumentation within the game. We've gotten a lot of feedback from you guys, and then we're now talking about possibly developing some lesson plans together.
Great, and the last question I wanted to ask for now is, so in your experience with young people, obviously layering argumentation into a game, the idea behind it is to make the learning process fun. Are kids enjoying Argubot Academy?
Yeah, engagement seems high. We've got an engagement survey that we're putting together now, so that in the beta we can actually get some real numbers behind that. But it's been interesting to watch this both in the interview setting, so in more of a laboratory-like setting, and then also in a classroom setting. Kids are excited to play the game. If you can imagine what it might be like in the classroom to start talking about argumentation as a topic, and then compare that vision to what it's like to initiate that conversation or carry it out with something like Argubot Academy as a reference point, it's that kind of difference. Kids are really enjoying it, and it's sparking conversation between kids, which is exciting because now we start moving from this sort of one modality of reading arguments and being a critical reader to multiple modalities of getting kids involved in conversations about arguments themselves, about the components of the arguments and how they work.
Wonderful. And please do also jump in as we talk with Jason and Rachel if you have questions for them. But Jason, Rachel, I'd love to bring you into the conversation, given the fact that in both your cases you have done playtesting in summer writing camps, or in your case, Rachel, in a game playing camp. And I'm wondering what your experience has been with Argubot Academy, both as the instructors in the camp, but then also what have you witnessed with regard to the ways in which your young people are engaging with the game?
So like I said, I work in the summer with, it's a gaming camp, but it's also writing oriented, obviously, because it's with the Upstate Writing Project. And we were lucky to get forward the email about Argubot, and we thought it would be a great opportunity to test it out this summer with our campers, since they consider themselves expert gamers. So we got some really good feedback from the gaming perspective, but also the writing perspective about what they were learning. So I'm going to try and share with you some pictures that I took of the gamers actually playing the game this summer, and I have some reviews up, so let me try and do the screen share. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So these are the programmers from this summer. Here's one boy engaging with locking his core and choosing his claim and his evidence. Here's another one studying, figuring out where to go next. I think he just completed a level. And here's another one working on his. I also have some feedback that they gave that I can share with you. A lot of it's more gaming oriented. Specifically about the structure of the game and so forth. But as far as the feedback that I got, sorry, I don't know if you can still see me. Am I back again?
Yes, you are.
All right, great. I'd have to agree with what Seth said. I saw a lot of engagement. They were very determined to try and beat the game. And obviously, since they're gamers, they wanted to beat it first. So it was kind of a race to the finish, which I thought was very interesting. I saw a lot of higher level learning with, I had about 5th through 9th graders working on it. So I know for some of them, some of the questions, especially for the 5th graders, were a little bit above their grade level, but they seemed to be fine with it. And I think it has to do with the fact that it was a video game that they were working with. Had it been in a classroom setting, they might not have been as receptive. So I think that was a great opportunity for them. I really thought that it's a great way to teach because students really love to become masters of something, masters of a skill, and so this is a great way to do that with the gaming aspect. They found it very relevant. A lot of the questions really honed in for the middle schoolers. So they really enjoyed the arguments that I think were presented because they kind of felt one way or the other about it, but they also had to use the evidence that was given to make their claims. So I think it made them kind of think differently in terms of persuasion versus argument, which is really important as we get into Common Core with separating the two, because sometimes the students see them as very similar, and that's where Argubot comes in and really defines the terms and the structure of what an argument really means. So as far as my classroom, I would love to use this as an introduction to the terms and the relationships between them, specifically claim, evidence, and warrant. I know when I was playtesting it, I was interested in finding out when warrant was going to come into the picture, so I'm glad, Seth, that you mentioned that was coming in later on further in the game, because I think that's a very important aspect for the students to know. I know that you mentioned that some of the students kind of missed the, I guess it was the relationship testing section, and I agree. I felt like a lot of them kind of ignored that spot. I would really like to, with my students when I do it this year, kind of have them go along and make notes of the definitions as a reference to throughout the game, because I know a lot of there's a lot of terminology that they are introduced to in the game that sometimes they forget. So it might be good to have like a resource in front of them that they can refer to throughout the game. But that might be something that could be added, as a resource for teachers to use with their students that might be really good in addition to playing the game. I would love to take some of the arguments that are presented from the game and have the students develop them into larger and longer pieces in the classroom. So I think it's a great introduction to practicing putting the core components together, but it would also be great to then take it and really develop it with more research. I could see integrating it with other subject areas, especially science and social studies. So that's where I'm at.
Rachel, I want to pick up on one thing that you had said, which is that you found that for the young people that you worked with this summer, they found the claims that were presented in the game as relevant. And I'm wondering, what about the claims were relevant, or were there particular claims that were most relevant to them?
I don't know if there were any in particular that they really mentioned, but I know that they seemed to be ones that they could relate to. I noticed that, if it was something they didn't understand, they struggled more with figuring out what evidence to connect it to. I'm thinking there was one about maybe plants or animals. I can't remember specifically. But if they really didn't have the prior knowledge to connect to it, they struggled with connecting that evidence. But I did feel like the majority of what was asked, I think the one off the top of my head was about ice cream flavors. That was an easy beginner one about whether you like chocolate or vanilla the most. And so I thought that was a great way to get their toes in the water and kind of get them to understand how arguments everywhere. So it's not just for professionals or adults, but they can use argument on a daily basis whether they realize it or not. So I thought those were really good, you know, arguments to present to them.
Great, thanks, Rachel. And I'd love to bring Jason into this conversation. And one way that I'll do that is I got a chance actually to be there for one portion of the playtesting that happened in the summer writing program that Jason led. And I'll just share this one quick anecdote related to engagement. I think simply the fact that the game is a tablet-based game, it seems to automatically lead to engagement. Jason's group had to be divided into two because there were not enough iPads. And the group that was able to actually engage with the game on this particular day, they were unbelievably excited without even knowing at all what it was that they were going to be doing. But just the fact that they had access to these tablets for some game purpose, they felt like they had won the lottery. So yeah, it was fascinating to witness that firsthand. But Jason, did you have things that you'd like to add about the playtesting experience in your summer writing program?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. And yeah, it was great having you with us that day. And I noticed that excitement too, although there were a few of them who didn't know what to expect because we had the iPads out for other activities during the camp, and we had the software installed, you know, prior to GlassLab's visit. And there were a couple times, you know, I've taught before in situations where, you know, in a one-to-one iPad situation where you see, you know, you look across the room, you see someone who maybe looks like they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you walk closer and kind of take a look at their screen and see what they're up to. And, you know, a few times prior to GlassLab's visit, they were playing Argubot Academy, which is a good way to be off task, you know. So there were a couple of students who were already kind of experimenting with the software. So I think that's a really good sign. And after GlassLab's visit as well, you know, we had a number of students, you know, continuing to play the game and develop it in the game. But yeah, Rachel's comments were excellent and really spot on. And I noticed some similar things. You know, as a language arts teacher, you know, I've worked primarily with high school, and you know, this summer I've been with middle school students. But at both those levels, you know, teaching argumentation skills can be a challenge because it can get a little dry. You know, I think that there's a lot of potential for engagement there with students because they enjoy arguing. But I think to move the arguments beyond a superficial level and to kind of get to the substance of an argument, to introduce that level of complexity, is where it becomes a challenge, and it's where you can lose students. And I think what's really beautiful about Argubot Academy is that, you know, it sneaks that learning in there. You know, it sneaks that learning in, and you know. And when I say sneaks it in, what I mean is it packages it in a way that, you know, as it's been said previously by Seth and Rachel, in a way that really grabs the attention of students and holds it. Things that seem very simple, such as, you know, being able to select which Argubot, you know, that you want to have, and you know, the ability to make choices, I think, in the game and to tailor the experience of the game. To the individual playing it, you know, that in of itself, you know, I think brought a lot of engagement. I noticed with my students, and you know, I talked a little bit about their experiences playing the game afterwards, and one thing they said, you know, when I asked them about challenges that they had while they were playing, one of the challenges they mentioned was that they would have maybe liked to be introduced to more of the terminology that was used in the game prior to the game, which I found surprising because I really think that's a strength of the game. You know, rather than take the time to define, you know, these different forms of argumentation and their components, I really like that it just kind of throws students into the game, and you know, they kind of discover the definitions of this terminology as they're playing. You know, I think that you know, curiosity and the motivation to advance in the game is really something cool, and something that can only be accomplished in gameplay like this.
Great, thanks, Jason. I had a question for the two of you. I know that often summer writing camps at local writing project sites tend to attract a wide range and diverse group of young people. I was wondering if that was the case for your particular writing camps, and if so, if there were any access issues in terms of the, say, for instance, text heaviness of the game, or the fact that the game and I'm not sure actually, and perhaps Seth can answer this question, but if the game is primarily or exclusively in English, if that was an issue as well. So really the question is about access, and the accessibility of the game to the young people that you work with. Again, because I know that often writing camps serve a diverse population.
I don't have any observations to contribute. Rachel?
I guess my only observations that I noticed was, we're from South Carolina, and last year was a kind of a bridging year where we were still with our state standards, but we were also beginning to incorporate Common Core because we hadn't officially accepted it yet. We were supposed to accept it this next school year, and so I know that a few of the students hadn't been introduced to argument before from their school. So some of the terminology was very new to them, if that's what you're asking. But even the ones that had not seen argument before in the classroom, I think Argubot really scaffolded their learning into understanding what it means to be an argument. So, and other than that, I know that demographically we do have a wide variety of students and from different school districts, and I know that sometimes access to these iPads is not always possible. From my school, we have a Mac lab. I don't think we have iPad 2s. We might have iPad 1s. But I was just thinking, some of the schools in the district or in the state might not have access to this particular type of technology. So whether eventually this app will be made for more, softwares or, like Dells and stuff. I know those are more popular probably with the school districts, but those are the only concerns that I saw that I can speak to.
Hey, Paul, can I just chime in there? It's a really crucial issue what you're bringing up, and it's something that we've been working on here very intentionally. Two ways. One, in terms of accessibility, we've really focused in on the lexile level of the text. So right now, if you go in there and you play, there are some very challenging words, for example, some very challenging constructions in there as well. The lexile level of the text is pretty high. We've done that somewhat intentionally in the sense that we thought that we had a game that was going to be engaging enough that students would be willing to really work through some tough text. And we didn't want to pass up an opportunity to give them that tough text and those new vocabulary words. That being said, we will go over the next few weeks actually in preparation for the beta release. We're now kicking all that text back into our Lexile app to really get a better understanding now of what the actual Lexile level is for each component of the game. We've got a general sense. We want to get more dialed in and more specific with it. So that's one thing we'll be doing. And then the second is, we're very motivated to focus on English language learners in particular as a student body, as a student group. And so that shows up largely in our playtest audience. So we've done a lot of work to try and get to playtest in classrooms and in districts where there are many EL students. And in particular, one case comes to mind. It's a National Writing Project teacher, one of your folks. She's based in San Francisco, and she specializes in newcomers, for example. And that was one of our test classes. And we brought in a few observers, myself, did some videotaping, did some audio taping, and a lot of note-taking to understand how different components of the game, different moments of the game were impacting these language learners in particular, all with an effort to bring some design skill to bear to make it to make the passage a little bit less burdensome for those students in the right ways. So those are two efforts. I think we have more work to do, and we will be doing that over the next 3 months or so. But that's a wonderful point, and it's something that we're really motivated to treat.
Thanks, Seth. And given where we're at in the hour, I would love to look forward a little bit and hear more about what's in store with regard to Argubot. But before we turn to that question, I'm wondering if Jason and Rachel have thoughts about how they are, and Rachel, you began to touch on this, but how you may conceive of using Argubot next year, and if you will, in fact. I know, Jason, that you are not a classroom teacher, so I'm wondering whether this experience will be translated to your staff at your school in some way. If not, that's fine too, but I'm just curious about your plans for the coming year for the two of you, and then I'd love to hear from Seth about what GlassLab has in store with Argubot Academy and any other great games that you have coming up. So, Rachel, would you like to start, or Jason, would you like to start off? Either one.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to speak to that. Yeah, so I won't be in the classroom next year, unfortunately, but certainly at the previous school that I was at. Actually, this spring with the alpha release of Argubot Academy, we had a couple teachers experimenting, with that. So I'll certainly, continue to encourage that. And it's certainly a tool that I would use, and I'll let Rachel say more about it because I think she said it really well. It's a great entry point, it's a great entry point to discussing about other issues, regards to argumentation. And I'm really curious kind of about the work that GlassLab's doing with the classroom-based instruction, which I think you see the app, but one thing that I know GlassLab does really well, and writing project as well, is how do you weave that into classroom instruction, and what is the classroom instruction component? So yeah, I think that the app and the materials that exist at this point are ripe for exploration in those areas.
Great, thanks, Jason. And Rachel, would you like to talk a little bit about how you are imagining using Argubot next year? Or in the coming year, I should say. I shouldn't say next year, because probably school is starting for you any day now.
It is, in 2 weeks, so I'm excited. I would love to use this, the beginning of my argument unit, even introducing argument to my students. It'd be a great tool to use. I definitely think I would pull from the program, the terminology, and kind of briefly introduce the kids to it. Or even have them start taking, writing their own definitions as they play. I think that would be an essential tool for them, to use throughout, learning about argument. So I think that'd be a great introduction to the terminology, and not only the core components of what make an argument and how that's different than persuasion. Because I always try to, when I'm teaching argument, I always try to make a comparison between persuasion and argument so they can tell the difference, because they are very distinct. And moving from our state standards into Common Core, we really heavily focused on persuasion before, so now we're really kind of trying to shift their thinking. And so it's important to kind of compare the two for them when we first introduce the unit, so they can tell that there is a difference between argument and persuasion. So I think this would be a great tool to do it. Great practice for them once we get started. It would give them ideas in case we need to write a longer piece. There's something on there they want to pull off and do more research and add more evidence to. I know the game already does provide evidence for some of the topics, but that would be a great way to integrate some of the other classes, because there's a lot of science content on there, so it'd be a great way to pull in the science teacher and kind of have her work with the students on some of the things that are talked about in there. But it's very hands-on learning, which I really like, how scaffolded it is for the students to understand. I know, Seth, you said it's a higher lexile level, but that's great. I love setting that expectation high and really having the students use context clues to figure out what it means. And I love when a word comes up that they don't understand, write it down and make sure it's brought up so we can discuss it as a class. So I think it's great that it's it sets expectations high for them which creates a challenge, which I think makes it more engaging for the students. They're interested in it because of that. So I would really love to use this and, use it as a starting point and develop even from there and kind of integrate it together and reference it back and forth and just kind of blend it throughout, understanding what argument is. I would love to, Seth, see some kind of writing element in the program later on. I know you're in the works of developing a little bit more, but some way for the students to kind of get some writing into the program. A lot of it's kind of selecting right now, but I know it's a very, you want to build the levels with skills from easy to hard, but it'd be great later on for some of the levels to have some kind of written response where the students are typing. I think that would be really neat to see. So kind of getting more to where they're providing more of the information rather than choosing. So I think it adds another element to their understanding.
And before we segue to Seth, I had one quick question for you, Rachel. You seem very confident in moving forward with the game. Is this something that you typically would engage in as a teacher, introducing game-based learning, introducing work on an iPad in this way, or work that is digitally and computer mediated?
Absolutely. I love the use of technology. A lot of technology that I've used in the past couple years has been more of narrative, a lot with Storybird and GameStar Mechanic. I've done several units with both of those, but unfortunately there hasn't been any gaming for argument particularly, so this is really great and perfect timing with Common Core and everything, so I'm really happy to know that this will be here this year. So that now I can add this element, this technology to our argument unit. I think that's really beneficial.
Wonderful. And now I'll turn it over to Seth, because it sounds like Rachel threw down the gauntlet in terms of what she's hoping will come next with Argubot.
Yeah, we're motivated to work in the writing piece, as she talked about, and then the other component too is. Almost every playtester we've had has mentioned an interest in being able to debate or duel with their friends. So if you could imagine, instead of dueling with an AI, the system itself being able to pair up with a buddy and have an Argubot battle. So those are two things that are top on our list, but they're also both very complex to pull off. So we've got a lot of work to do if we take them on.
Yeah, I also, sorry, I heard that a lot from my gamers. They really equated it to kind of like the Pokemon battle, which I didn't know they would even know, since I feel like that was a few years ago. But they would love to battle one another in a multiplayer game, and not even just people at their school, but worldwide or whatever. They really wanted that multiplayer aspect, which I thought would be really neat to see, because then. It's no longer the computer outsmarting you, which they assume would be, the smarter element, but it's another student that they're battling against. So
yeah, that's
it's a little bit of a challenge.
That's great. Yeah, those are definitely in our. I hope they're in our future. We'll see. So in terms of what's coming up for us, Paul, you asked about where we're headed with all this. There's a lot going on here that's very exciting, and we haven't mentioned at all yet the assessment system that lives within Argubot Academy, within Mars Generation 1, which is maybe a topic for another discussion, but I just want to mention that it's there. And what's happening is, as players play the game, in the background there's an assessment engine running that's looking at their clicks, looking at their choices, looking at the kinds of arguments they win and lose, the kinds of ways that they win or lose those arguments. And it's modeling that behavior in such a way that we're able to make some inferences about student sophistication with argumentation. And so very quickly here, as we approach what I call the beta trial early on in the conversation, we'll be able to provide dashboards to teachers, likely in the fall, that sort of describe students' level of sophistication with argumentation, these different components I mentioned, matching claims and evidence, critiquing claim and evidence pairs for the relevance and support, as well as identifying schemes and posing critical questions. So that's one thing that's coming very quickly, and we're excited about that, the idea of reporting that information out both to teachers and students, and then using that information to drive the dynamics of the game, so the game can adjust to students' ability level. That's one piece. And then as a group, we also have several games that are coming out. There are two arms to our work. One is development of new games. The second is re-engineering or redesigning existing games that have already been in the market. And so one example of that is our Simcity Edu product. That's a wonderful case where we took this beautiful game that exists in the market already. It has high production value, very interesting game in its own right, and then we've re-engineered it to help students learn more about systems thinking. So that's out there now, and we're doing some nice things with that game as well, with the dashboards and the teacher reporting. That will be coming out in the fall as well. And then another part of our work is third-party games. So we've started working more closely with third-party game designers who have games already, and providing assessment services for them, as well as a series of more technical services to them. The assessment services are interesting because many groups have designed learning games or games they think are effective for learning, but they don't yet have this assessment component or this dynamic component I just mentioned for Mars Generation 1. And so in the fall, we'll bring in 5 new designers, groups that have existing games, and we'll help them develop assessment systems for them. That's something else. Now, I just want to wrap things right back to the initial point that I brought up, which is that we're going to be going out to beta trials in the fall for Mars Generation 1. So it's been through alpha trials with some 400 students or so, and then plus the 200 plus play tests we've had. So things are getting right. We're pretty confident in what we have now. This beta trial now will give us a larger sample to work with and give teachers an opportunity to try this in their classrooms. And I just want to say that if folks are interested in doing that I hope that they'll contact the lead for our GlassLab teacher network. And if I can, let me just see if I can do it quickly, Paul. Pull up the slide that has that contact information in it. Let me try and get this right the first time. Let's see. Can you guys see my screen now? No?
Yeah, see it now.
Okay, great. So the GlassLab Teacher Network is led by Tomas. He's here, he's one of our great colleagues. And that community is really designed to give people a chance to have conversations with one another, teachers who are interested in bringing games and play into their classroom. It's also designed to give those teachers access to materials related to games and learning. And the third is give them early access to invitations for using GlassLab games in their classroom. As a GlassLab Teacher Network member, you've got free access to things like Mars Generation 1, Simcity Edu, and so on. Even if you're not a member, you've got free access to that too. But you've got early access in particular, which is good. And then you've got early notification of all of our third-party games that we're bringing in too. So I just want to highlight Tomas's contact information there. He's here, Tomas at glasslabgames.org, particularly if you're interested in participating in the network, but even if you're not, but you're interested in participating in the beta trial, please contact him. He'll help you, help bring you along.
Wonderful, thanks, Seth. Very excited about what's coming down the road in the fall, and I just wanted to, as we're getting close to the top of the hour, thank you and thank Rachel and Jason for being part of this really enriching conversation. I'm excited to engage in conversations in the future with all of you about this work. So
Thanks.
Thank you, yeah, thank you, and I'll just close out by saying that if those in the audience are interested in learning more about connected learning, which undergirds all of what we do here at Educator Innovator, please be sure to check out the Connected Learning Alliance at clalliance.org, where there are tremendous testimonials from practitioners and informative multimedia pieces. And if you'd like to keep abreast of future opportunities like this amazing conversation here at Educator Innovator among our partners, please subscribe to our newsletter at educatorinnovator.org. So once again, thank you, Seth and Rachel and Jason. Really appreciate this, and so long, everyone.